Rain whispered softly against the windows of William Harper's Seattle home, each drop like a memory tapping on glass. Inside, the quiet hum of an old radiator fought back the March chill. William sat at his desk, glasses low on his nose, reviewing a stack of invoices from the week's auto shop work. Grease still clung beneath his fingernails, reminders of his last job on a customer's faulty transmission. The flannel shirt on his back, worn and faded, smelled faintly of oil and metal. He was halfway through a billing summary when the front door slammed open. Mason's voice cut through the calm like a blade. "Dad, I need $5,000, tonight." William looked up slowly, pen still in hand. His son stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hoodie, sneakers squeaking against the hardwood floor. Mason's face was flush, jaw tight, energy radiating from him like static before a storm. "I already sent your allowance last week," William said carefully. "$3,000, Mason. That barely covers your rent, you said." Mason scoffed, pacing. $3,000 doesn't touch what I need. You live in this house, own multiple garages, sit on cash, and toss me scraps." William's chest tightened. The edge in Mason's voice wasn't frustration. It was contempt. He straightened in his chair, military posture slipping into place. "You're not a child anymore. You need steady work, not more handouts." Mason stopped cold, turned, and looked at his father like he was a stranger. "Why should I work? You already built everything. You hoard it all like some old dictator afraid to let go. You ever think maybe I could do better?" The accusation sliced deep. William's mind drifted to late nights under a broken lift, turning bolts until his fingers bled. He thought of Sarah, how he held her hand in the hospital, promising to raise their son right. "I gave you everything I could," he said, voice low. "And I'll take everything when you're gone," Mason snapped. "Face it, Dad. After you die, I'll run the shops better than you ever did." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been burning too long. William's vision blurred for a moment, not from tears, but from the sheer weight of disbelief. His boy, his only son, calculating his death like a business transition. "Mason!" But Mason was already moving. He spun, yanked open the door, and vanished into the rain. The silence that followed felt different, thicker. William sat motionless, staring at the photo above the fireplace. Sarah's face smiled back at him, her arm around an 8-year-old Mason in his Little League uniform. He remembered that day. Mason had struck out and cried. Sarah whispered something into his ear, and he smiled again. She always knew what to say. He hadn't spoken to her in 17 years, but her absence never left the room, especially now. For a long time, William stayed there, watching the rain and trying to find the moment it all went wrong. Days passed. William poured himself into work. He ate meals alone. He stared at his son's empty plate across the table and wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had raised a stranger. Then the call came. "Hey, Dad, I've been thinking." The voice on the phone was Mason's, but it carried a false warmth, too smooth to be real. "I was way out of line last week. I said things I didn't mean. I want to make it up to you." William waited. "I've got this idea," Mason continued. "Let's go camping. Like we used to. You and me. Alaska. Denali." The words hit William like cold water. Mason hadn't suggested a trip in years. And Denali. "I already booked everything. Flights leave March 25th. Got gear, permits, even reserved a cabin at the Park Lodge. It's all set. Just meet me at SeaTac." The temptation tugged at William's chest. The thought of reclaiming what they'd lost. Those quiet nights by the fire. Father and son stories under open skies. Sarah always said camping brought out the truth in people. Still, something tugged at his gut. A whisper of doubt. Mason's words, too rehearsed. His tone, too eager. But what if it was real? "What do you say?" Mason pressed. William looked around the quiet house, at the old chair Sarah used to read in, the photo on the mantel, the dinner plate untouched. "All right," he said. "Let's do it." "Really? That's great. I'll send you the flight info. This is going to be amazing, Dad. You'll see." The call ended. William sat there for a long time, phone still in hand. Outside, the Seattle drizzle kept falling, painting soft rivers against the glass. He leaned back in his chair, unsure if he had just agreed to a second chance or something else entirely. William Harper arrived at SeaTac Airport before sunrise, dressed in his oldest boots and a weathered field jacket he had not worn since his Navy days. The terminal buzzed with early travelers, but he stood still among them, scanning faces until he spotted Mason. His son looked clean, refreshed, almost too put together. The backpack on his shoulder was brand new, tags still swinging from the zipper. "Dad," Mason called out, his smile wide. "Perfect timing. They just called our boarding group." William nodded, but his eyes lingered on the slight twitch in Mason's left eyebrow, an old tell from his teenage years, usually when hiding something. On the flight to Anchorage, Mason chatted nonstop. He talked about photography, the fresh air, the cleansing solitude of nature. William responded politely, but noticed how often Mason checked his phone, even in airplane mode. When the attendant passed, Mason declined the in-flight meal. William didn't eat either. During the layover, Mason disappeared 3 times, each time for 20 minutes, claiming restroom breaks. William watched the terminal clock, then the planes taxiing outside, all while a quiet tension began to coil beneath his skin. The final flight crossed rugged terrain, mountains rising like jagged teeth. William shared stories from his Navy survival training: how to start fires with wet wood, how to find direction without a compass. "You really know all that stuff?" Mason asked, scribbling on a napkin. 20 years in the service teaches you a thing or two," William replied, watching his son's reaction. It was admiration, but only on the surface. Beneath it, something colder moved. Anchorage greeted them with sharp wind and a sky the color of slate. At the rental desk, Mason insisted on a Toyota 4Runner, full insurance and tire chains. "You expecting a blizzard?" William joked. "Just being cautious," Mason replied, eyes darting. They drove north on Highway 3, the road stretching like a silver ribbon between endless trees. Mountains flanked them, distant and still. William tried to break the silence. "Beautiful country." "Yeah," Mason said, eyes fixed ahead. "Real isolated." They stopped at a gas station as the sun dipped behind the hills. While William filled the tank, he watched through the window as Mason leaned into a phone call inside the convenience store. Shoulders hunched, voice low, posture tight. When Mason returned, William asked casually, "Everything all right?" "Just checking weather updates. System might be moving in," Mason said. William had checked that morning. Clear skies were forecasted for 3 straight days. As they pulled back onto the road, William's gut whispered louder now. Something was wrong, but not wrong like a forgotten tool or misaligned part in the garage. Wrong like memory and instinct stirring together into quiet alarm. Denali's wooden sign came into view as they rounded a bend. "Welcome to the park." The ranger station was half buried in snow, with a few cabins scattered in the pines beyond. At the front desk, a young clerk looked up. "First time in Denali?" "For him," William said, nodding toward Mason. "I've been here before, military training." Mason stepped forward. "We're doing the Tlanica River route." The clerk hesitated. "That's pretty advanced terrain. Most folks start with shorter trails this time of year." "We're experienced," Mason said quickly. William glanced sideways. Mason had not gone camping since high school. They met Ranger Walsh an hour later. She was compact, weathered, and looked like she could survive weeks out there with only a thermos and a knife. "Gentlemen," she said, unrolling a map, "this route takes you 30 miles from the nearest station. No cell coverage, no other hikers, no quick exits." She pointed to red markers. "Grizzly activity here. 2 cubs spotted, means a mother nearby. Also had wolves and aggressive moose reported." "What about evacuation?" Mason asked. "Helicopter only. Could take days." William answered honestly about his background. Mason mumbled something about Boy Scouts and camping with college friends. The ranger wasn't convinced. "We've lost overconfident hikers to this route before. You sure you're ready?" "We'll be fine," Mason said. "My father's practically a survivalist." They signed waivers, watched safety videos, rented bear-resistant containers, and programmed GPS beacons. I'm also taking the Remington, William said, holding the rifle like an old friend. You sure? Mason asked. Alaska Rule 1, never go into bear country unarmed. By dusk, they arrived at the trailhead, mile marker 23. Snow crunched under boots as they unloaded packs. Mason's backpack sagged awkwardly. He groaned, shifting the straps. This thing's heavy. Packing takes practice, William said, adjusting the weight on Mason's shoulder. His son flinched. You hurt something? Old injury. I'm fine. They moved slowly into the forest. The trees closed around them, branches whispering overhead. A thin layer of snow softened every step, muffling the world. Wildlife signs appeared quickly. Moose tracks, fresh scat, claw marks on trees. William scanned constantly. Mason walked stiffly, flinching at distant wolf howls. 3 hours in, they reached a clearing by a creek. Flat ground, tree cover, and visibility on all sides. Ideal campsite. William set to work like clockwork. Food cache high, cooking area downwind, tent pegs deep in the frost. Mason struggled with tangled lines. Need help? William asked. Mason held up the ropes. I forgot this part. William knelt, showing him again, hands moving slower this time. His son watched, quiet. The fire was built, dinner cooked. Silence settled. Mason stared into the flames. Remember when we used to do this? William asked. You were maybe 10, insisted on burning marshmallows black. Mom loved it, Mason murmured. She said camping brought out the best in people. She was right. Mason nodded slowly. Then, what was it like growing up poor, Dad, before the Navy? The question felt planted. Still, William answered. Farms. Sweat. Nothing came easy. Sounds hard. It built character. Mason looked at the fire again. Lucky for me, huh? Never had to build mine. The conversation dipped, then returned with questions about survival, tactics, even how to spot lies. William shared, more than usual. I'll take first watch, Mason said later, tossing a log on the fire. Not tired. William hesitated, then agreed. He crawled into the tent, eyes heavy. But as sleep crept in, he noticed something. The fire crackled. But Mason no longer moved. No footsteps. No shifting. No clearing throat. Just silence. Not the silence of reflection, but the kind of silence that waits. The cold woke William before the light did. His breath rose in soft clouds inside the tent, and the fire outside had long since gone to embers. At first he heard nothing. No birds, no wind, no footsteps. Then came the unmistakable sound of metal. Zippers, buckles, the quiet thunk of equipment being loaded. William unzipped the tent slowly. Mason stood by the truck, loading gear into the back with practiced efficiency that William had never seen in him before. Every piece of survival equipment, GPS device, food containers, emergency beacon, even the rifle, was being packed away. What's going on? William's voice sliced through the silence. Mason turned quickly, his face flat, unreadable. We're heading back. Weather's turning. William stepped forward. The sky was pale blue, crystal clear. No clouds, no wind. That's not what the forecast said. Mason kept moving. Plans changed. The tone in his voice made William stop. Cold certainty pressed into his chest. He took another step. Talk to me, Mason. What's really happening here? Mason froze. Then something in his expression cracked. Years of resentment boiling over. You want to know what's happening? His voice rose. I'm done, Dad. Done with you controlling everything. With you dangling money like a prize, making me feel small. I'm taking control. William stared. You brought me here to leave me. Mason met his gaze. No hesitation. Very good. Yes, I'm leaving you here. No gear, no food, no way back. 30 miles of wilderness should give you time to think about the life you destroyed. You're angry, William said carefully. You feel like I controlled too much. Maybe I did. But this is murder. Not if no one finds you. The tailgate slammed shut. William's hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the crushing realization of who his son had become. Mason, please. For a moment, something flickered in Mason's eyes, something like doubt or regret, but it vanished. Goodbye, Dad. The truck engine roared to life. William stepped forward, but Mason threw it in reverse, tires crunching on gravel. Then, just like that, he was gone. Silence fell like snow. William stood on the narrow trail alone, the spruce trees closing in like sentries. The dust from Mason's departure still hung in the air, but William's mind was already moving, fast, focused. Shock was a luxury. Survival came first. He took inventory. No phone, no food, no water, no tools, except for the small folding knife in his pocket, a habit from years ago. He checked the sun's position, estimating west. The road, the ranger station, everything was west. He turned and walked. Each step hurt. His knees, long past their prime, protested. The pack he no longer had would have held bandages, protein, water tablets. He had none of it now. Just determination and decades of military training. The woods thickened. He made deliberate noise, snapping twigs, clearing his throat. Bear territory demanded warning. Fresh claw marks slashed across tree bark. Paw prints the size of dinner plates dotted the mud. Mason had chosen this place well. Hours passed. The light shifted. William followed a game trail, deer, maybe moose. Where animals walked, there was often water. Where there was water, there was hope. His mouth dried, his legs trembled. Once, he had to retrace a missed path, burning precious time and energy, but he kept going. Then he heard it. Engines, far off, low and steady. He paused, heart thudding. Could be hunters, could be rangers, could be anyone. He turned toward the sound, pushing through underbrush that clawed at his arms. He stumbled out into a clearing. 4 ATV riders sat on a break, eating from packs. They looked up, startled by the figure that emerged, muddy, scratched, and breathing hard. "Sir?" one of them asked, rising. "You okay?" William tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. "My son. He left me. Took everything. Left me to die." The man stepped forward, peeling off his helmet. "I'm Oliver Reed, former ranger in this area." "Say that again?" William did. In fewer words than the story deserved, he told them. The expressions around him darkened. Oliver's face hardened. "That's not just abandonment," Oliver said. "That's attempted murder." Water was handed to him. Someone gave him a granola bar. Another rider pulled out a GPS tracker. Oliver studied it. "If your son took the highway back to Anchorage, he's got at least a 6-hour drive. But we know a shortcut, an old ranger trail. We can beat him to the lodge." William's jaw clenched. "I want to be there. I want to see his face when I walk through that door." Oliver gave a small nod. "Climb on, let's get you home." They mounted the ATVs and took off down the service trail, twisting paths only rangers used. William clung tightly, wind cutting across his cheeks, pain rippling through tired muscles. But with every mile, his focus sharpened. He wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He was preparing. The trap his son had set had failed. Now it was time to lay one of his own. By the time William returned to Denali Lodge Motel, the sun had not yet set, but his entire world had shifted. Oliver pulled the ATV into the gravel lot behind the cabins. William stepped off slowly, legs stiff, every muscle aching, but he stood straight, his back no longer bent under grief. Now it was powered by a purpose. The rental truck was not there. "Looks like we beat him," Oliver said. William nodded. "Good. That gives me time to prepare." Oliver placed a hand on his shoulder. "What do you want to do, William? Go to the police right now?" William looked toward the row of rustic rooms, each with carved wooden numbers and faded flags. One of them held the duffel bag Mason had left behind. One of them would be the stage for the confrontation ahead. "Not yet," William said. "He's expecting an empty room. I want him to find me waiting." Oliver's eyes sharpened. "You want witnesses?" I want proof, William replied. Inside the room, everything was exactly where they had left it 2 days ago. Neatly folded clothes, untouched bed, the soft hum of the mini fridge. William moved slowly, deliberately. He opened his duffel bag and pulled out the legal documents he had carried since Seattle. The will. The notarized letter. The final change Mason never saw coming. He spread the pages across the small desk by the window, exactly where Mason would notice them. I'll need video, William said. Audio, too. Can you help? Oliver nodded. You're not the first to need a setup like this. I've got gear in the truck. Within the hour, a small digital camera was hidden in the adjoining room, angled perfectly through a barely open door. A backup recorder sat beneath the dresser. William rehearsed nothing. He simply sat in the chair near the desk, hands resting on his knees, waiting. The motel clerk had offered them an adjoining room. Oliver would be stationed there, camera rolling, ready to call the police if needed. You sure about this? Oliver asked one last time. William nodded slowly. He planned my death for money. I'm going to show him what that money really cost. Outside, darkness fell over the lodge. The chill of early spring settled in. William sat still, breathing slow and steady, heart beating not from fear, but from resolve. At exactly 8:47 p.m., headlights swept across the parking lot. William did not move. The truck door opened. Steps crunched on gravel. A key slid into the lock. The knob turned. Then the door opened. Mason stepped inside casually, wearing the face of a man returning to an empty room. He froze. His father sat waiting. Mason blinked. Dad? William tilted his head. Evening. The color drained from Mason's face. How are you? How did you get back? William's voice was calm, almost casual. Turns out I am harder to kill than you planned. Mason stumbled backward slightly, reaching behind him for the doorframe. I don't understand. You were 30 miles from the road, William finished for him. Yes, with no food, no gear, no hope, as you intended. Except I found some people out there, real people who actually help others survive. Mason's mouth opened, but nothing came out. William stood slowly, picking up the legal documents from the desk. Do you want to know the best part? He held the will up, letting Mason see the header. 3 weeks ago, after you screamed at me for not giving you more money, I changed my will. Everything you hoped to inherit, gone. Not a cent. Mason blinked. You can't. I did. He took a step forward. You planned a murder, not a spur-of-the-moment crime. You researched, calculated, rehearsed. You packed survival gear you never intended to use. You picked a route even the rangers warned against. You wanted my death to look like an accident. Mason's voice cracked. You controlled everything my whole life. You kept me dependent. William nodded slowly. I did. I confused money with love. That's my failure as a father. But what you did, Mason, that's your failure as a man. He let the silence hang heavy between them. Then he stepped toward the door. You know what happens next. Mason reached out, desperate. Please wait. We can fix this. William turned back one last time. Some things don't get fixed. Some things get recorded. And with that, he walked out into the cold night air, toward the adjoining room where Oliver waited. Camera still rolling, police on speed dial, and justice finally in motion. The fluorescent lights of the Anchorage Police Department buzzed quietly overhead as William sat across from Detective Sarah Martinez, a woman whose expression blended professionalism with empathy. On the metal table between them lay a USB drive, a folder of signed statements, and a printed copy of the newly filed will. Mr. Harper, she began, her voice calm but firm, this is the most premeditated case of attempted wilderness murder I have seen in 8 years. William offered no reaction. She clicked her laptop, and Mason's voice filled the room. Go meet the Grizzlies, Dad. The detective paused the recording. That was your son's goodbye? William nodded. After taking the gear, the rifle, the food, everything, Detective Martinez took a deep breath. He could be facing 15 to 25 years. Wilderness abandonment with intent to kill is considered attempted murder here. Alaska law does not take this lightly. William glanced toward the glass window beside them. Beyond it, in the processing area, sat Mason, hands cuffed, shoulders slumped. The mask he had worn for years, smug entitlement, calculated charm, had crumbled. There was no grief, no shame, only the stunned silence of a man caught in his own trap. Detective Martinez followed his gaze. "Do you want to speak with him?" William hesitated. "No, not anymore. That version of my son. He died the moment he walked away from me in those woods." She nodded gently, respecting the finality of his words. "Your statement, the footage, and the documents are enough," she said. "We'll handle it from here." William stood, his movements steady despite the fatigue that clung to his bones. His eyes were clearer than they had been in years. "One more thing," he said. "I want to establish a foundation, in my wife's name, the Sarah Harper Fund, for single parents, veterans, and young people trying to rebuild their lives." Detective Martinez smiled faintly. That's one way to turn tragedy into purpose. As William stepped into the bright morning air outside the station, Oliver was waiting in his truck across the lot. "How'd it go?" he asked. William climbed into the passenger seat. Exactly as it needed to. They drove in silence for a while, Anchorage slowly passing by. Mountains watched them from a distance, their peaks glowing in the soft light. "You planning to go back to Seattle?" Oliver asked finally. "I will, but not the same man." Oliver nodded. "You beat the forest. You beat your own blood. What now?" William looked out the window where two kids rode bikes past a grocery store. "Now I build something better, something clean, something I don't have to apologize for." Oliver reached into the glove compartment and handed him a business card. "If you ever want to come back to Alaska, for the right reasons, camping, fishing, peace, call me. First trip's on me." William chuckled softly. "You really trust strangers that much?" Oliver shrugged. "You're not a stranger anymore, and you didn't come out of those woods bitter. That's rare." William gripped the card. For the first time in years, his fingers did not shake. 3 days later, back in Seattle, he sat in his office surrounded by paperwork, new bank accounts, trust documents, nonprofit charters. Everything Mason had tried to steal was now redirected towards something greater. The inheritance he would have killed for? Now feeding a scholarship fund in his mother's name. William opened a letter that had arrived that morning, 5 handwritten pages from Mason. It was a carefully disguised plea. Apologies wrapped in manipulation, regret camouflaged as strategy. The final paragraph promised change. If only William reconsidered the inheritance. He read it once, then fed it into the shredder. Some relationships don't survive attempted murder, and some fathers finally learn that letting go is the most powerful form of love. 6 months had passed since Alaska. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows of William's new office, smaller than before, tucked behind the garage bays of his oldest auto shop in Tacoma. The walls were freshly painted, a soft gray, with framed photos of Sarah and Mason in their happier years. One corner held a display of newspaper articles featuring the new scholarship fund. On the desk sat a bronze plaque that read, "The Sarah Harper Foundation for Single Parents, Veterans, and Youth in Transition." William leaned back in his chair and sipped from a paper coffee cup, watching a mechanic finish work on a Toyota in the bay below. He no longer managed the day-to-day. That job now belonged to a young woman named Elena, a former recipient of the Foundation's vocational grant. Single mother, Air Force veteran, and an engine whisperer. He had given her the shop. Fully. No conditions. No inheritance games. No dangling control. Just trust. The sound of laughter floated in from the garage, a sound that used to be rare here. It made William smile. For the first time in a long time, the shop was not just a business. It was a place where people built something with their hands and left with dignity. His phone buzzed. It was an email from the Anchorage District Attorney's Office. Subject: State of Alaska vs. Mason Harper. Sentencing summary. He stared at it for a moment, then opened it. 22 years. No parole for the first 15. Additional 5 years probation upon release. Mandatory psychological evaluation and restitution payments to the foundation in lieu of inheritance. William exhaled. Not relief. Just confirmation. There would be no appeals. Mason had taken a plea deal, likely under pressure from the mountain of evidence Oliver and the recordings had provided. He would not visit. He would not write back. That part of his life had ended, but something new had begun. Every Thursday afternoon, William volunteered at a small community center near Rainier Valley. He taught basic auto repair to teenagers, mostly kids from broken homes, group shelters, or recently out of juvenile detention. That day, he stood in front of 6 of them, grease on his palms, an open hood behind him. "All right," he said, smiling. "Who can tell me what a serpentine belt does?" Hands shot up, some unsure, others eager. For a moment, William felt Sarah standing beside him, the way she used to during Little League games or parent-teacher nights. He imagined her whispering, "Look at them. You're giving them more than money. You're giving them tools." At the end of the session, a boy named Marcus stayed behind. "Mr. Harper?" the boy asked. "Yeah?" Marcus looked nervous. "Are you really the guy from the news? The one who got left out in Alaska?" William paused, then nodded. "Yeah, that was me." Marcus hesitated. "And you survived that? Alone?" William smiled. "I did. But the hardest part wasn't the forest. It was realizing I'd spent 20 years trying to fix someone with money instead of love." Marcus stared. "But you still made that foundation. You still help people." "That's because I finally learned the difference between saving someone and supporting them." Marcus nodded slowly. "Thanks for not giving up." William gave his shoulder a pat. "That goes both ways, kid." Later that night, William sat on the back porch of his modest home outside Tacoma. It was not a mansion. It did not overlook the water, but it was peaceful. Birdsong echoed from the trees. A breeze stirred the wind chimes Sarah had once picked out from a flea market in Oregon. He held a letter in his lap, not from Mason. This one was from a young woman in Montana, single mother of 2, first in her family to go to college. The Sarah Harper Scholarship had paid for her books. She wrote to say thank you, and that she hoped to open her own auto shop one day. William smiled and folded the letter carefully, placing it in a box with the others. Each one proof that what had begun in pain could end in purpose. He stood up, stretched, and looked out toward the horizon. This was not the life he had planned, but it was finally a life he had chosen, on his own terms. There is something quietly powerful about watching a man rebuild his life, not with noise or vengeance, but with clarity and care. In the end, William Harper did not seek revenge. He found something far more lasting, the freedom that comes from letting go of what no longer defines you. He was left in the Alaskan wilderness, alone and stripped of everything he had spent his life building, not by strangers, but by his own flesh and blood. Yet from that betrayal came a different kind of legacy, not one of inheritance, but of impact. The very hands that once handed over blank checks now handed tools to kids who had never been taught how to hold a wrench, or their own future. And maybe that's the quiet miracle we miss in stories like this. Not the survival, but the choosing of purpose after pain. The lesson here is not just about betrayal or justice. It's about holding on to dignity when everything around you tells you to fall apart. It is about answering cruelty with conviction, and about shaping brokenness into something useful. William didn't just survive his son's attempt to erase him. He turned that tragedy into scholarships, training programs, and second chances for people who, like him, had once been underestimated or overlooked. In that way, the story becomes not about a father and a son, but about every person who's ever been pushed aside, taken for granted, or written off too soon. It's a reminder that our worth is not determined by others' opinions, but by what we choose to do when we are given the chance to start again. Because sometimes, the most enduring truth comes not from strength or status, but from those we least expect. Just like a match struck in the dark, dignity shines brightest when the world tries to smother it. So if you find yourself feeling forgotten, doubted, or discarded, remember this: the same forest that was meant to bury William became the very place he found himself again. And in doing so, he lit a path for others. Like the porch light left on for a traveler in the night, one quiet act of purpose can lead others home, even long after we're gone. Take a moment, wherever you are, to sit with this story. Let it settle. Let it remind you that no matter how old we are, how much we've lost, or how deeply we've been hurt, we still have the power to choose what comes next. And if this story touched something in you, some memory, some hope, some quiet part that understands what it means to begin again, consider sharing it. Because there might be someone out there waiting for a light they do not know how to ask for. Let them find it in you.